Hello, this is Priscilla with Scylla Travel, where I help you live the dream through travel. And Scylla Travel is a boutique travel agency that offers custom trip planning services to active adults, women entrepreneurs, business owners, retired military, and people who just want to get the most out of their vacation. So today, I'm here to talk to you about travel, culture, and the Black experience. Thank you. For those of you who are watching, I appreciate you. Um, Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're looking at this video. So today's topic is travel, culture, and the Black experience. So here we go. I'm going to get into today's topic. It's an interesting one. And I know that there are all sorts of um, perceptions out there, and people catch a lot of feelings about things these days. But if you're one of those sensitive people who get feelings, I want to make a disclaimer right now. You may want to turn away. Now, this is not a political discussion at all. It's about travel, it's about history, it's about different perspectives, which travel gives to all of us. That's why it's good to travel. Okay, it's always good to travel. And if you've got young children, expose your children to travel because it opens their minds. Travel helps you educate yourself. All education doesn't have to be formal education. It doesn't have to be at a 4-year degree. You can educate yourselves by traveling, connecting with people, getting to know people as people and not like what we see on TV and on social media. I grew up in the day of TV and movies. Those things have shaped my imagination of what people are like, but it's not really the case when you get out there and you start traveling. So I am in the United States for those of you who are not, and the United States is a huge, huge country, right? So multiple countries could fit into the United States. However, there is a huge number of people who don't have passports, and I'm talking about American citizens who are not in the military or who don't travel for their jobs or something like that, or who are just not that curious. They don't have passports, they don't travel, and their world view is shaped by the small area that they've confined themselves to. Travel helps you realize that you're not the center of the universe. There are actually other people living on the globe, on this planet that God gave us, and we're all diverse. We don't all think the same. We don't speak the same. We don't all eat the same. We don't do everything the same, but we are still the same. We are all flesh and blood, um, and we're all equal. So, travel is a good way for you to be exposed to other people and other cultures. So, now I'm going to get back to what I'm here to talk to you about. We're talking about travel culture and the Black experience. So, I can't get away from that, since I'm Black, I can't ignore that. So, this is real talk here. So, thank you for all of you who are watching. Um, the first thing I want to talk about, right? What is Black culture anyway, right? We hear that term thrown around, like I said, in movies. We hear it thrown around in TV and in social media. We have memes, we have videos, we have people on TikTok and Snapchat and all of the chats doing and saying all this stuff. And it gives off the perception that what these people are doing is Black culture. But Black culture actually is the sum total of cultural contributions to the mainstream culture by Black subculture. But what I mean by that is, I mean, all of the people, the things that they bring, like their perspective, the way that they live, their food, their traditions. People think of Black culture as one big giant homogenous blob, and it's not. It's made up of so many different pieces, and it's shaped by, starting with Africa, of course. Um, it's shaped by all of these different countries or different people groups, even starting in Africa. They're not all the same. Africa is a continent, and it's a huge continent. And there are 54 countries on the continent. And within those countries, there are different people groups, ethnicities. The older term is tribe, but ethnicities. And they all, and different communities, they do things different. They speak different languages. They're not all the same. They may be brown, but that does not mean they're all related. Okay, so the people who came to the greater Western area, for the most part, the majority were transported by the transatlantic slave trade. We know that. That happened over 500 years ago. It began over 500 years ago. Our education system in America sort of drops off when we talk about American history, right? We learn about Western civilization up until America, right? And then everybody comes to America, and then we don't learn anything else about Europe and all those other countries and those people after that. Guess what? Things happen there too. They're not the same. Um, Things happen in these other places. History didn't just stop there. Okay, so things have gone on. It didn't just stop in Africa, it didn't stop anywhere. Outside the United States, there's actually a world. So, um, back to Black culture. Um, Now, I talked about what we see on, social media, TV, things like that. That is what I'm talking about when I say pop culture or popular culture. Pop culture versus Black culture, right? Now, that is what people see, and they think that that represents Black culture. It doesn't. It doesn't. Okay. What you see in pop culture is it's just like a lifestyle based on assumptions about Black identities used in marketing, and it tends to shape what people think about Black people and Black culture, and it's not necessarily the actual cultural experience of Black people. So I just wanted to make that distinction. So throw that out of your head about the stuff that you see on TV and the commercials. That's overgeneralized. They take just something that seems cool or something that seems, catchy that they can market, to sell things, products, music. Um, it starts out in Black communities, but it changes because the marketing people change it. Hello, you know that. They change everything. All right, so it's also sort of like perceived as the cool factor, um, or fashionable. So, but what we see on TV, that's not the average person. Now, Black culture actually can be found anywhere in the globe, to be quite honest, right? So, it's actually the culture of Black communities in other parts of the world, other known as the diaspora. If you've never heard of that term before, it's called the African diaspora. And it's all those people who have left the continent of Africa, whether it have been by the slave trade, whether it have been by more recent um, travels where people have left their home country for economic reasons, education, jobs. A lot of people come from the country of Nigeria and migrate to the United States and become medical professionals. So there are quite a few doctors that I've met here in the United States. But they don't all come to the United States. They go other places too. You've got people from um, some of the West African countries in UK, quite a lot, as a matter of fact. We're also have the Caribbean, right? So the African diaspora is is really a kaleidoscope of culture and history and languages, and it's displayed in different types of events and activities. We also have Black culture in the Caribbean. I mentioned that. Um, Central and South America. Don't forget about Canada. And then we still have Europe. So there is actually Black culture everywhere. Okay, so when you hear the term African diaspora, that's what that means. So we've got sort of your classic diasporan, which are people who left or who were transported from the continent because of the transatlantic slave trade. Then you have the um, contemporary, which are, maybe their parents or their parents, they themselves or their parents or grandparents migrated from the continent to other places on the globe. We also have other types of migration from the Caribbean to the UK. Um, that was the Windrush generation. That's another discussion altogether. But we also have migrations from some of the former French colonies to France, um, and as well as Italy and Portugal. We have similar things. We also have two colonies in West Africa that were colonized by Black people themselves. They were ex slaves. So we've got Sierra Leone, um, which was a British colony. It was formed by the Sierra Leone. It was a company, and they were traders. This was after the transatlantic slave trade was ended, and then the British sort of rescued. They intercepted ships and they rescued the captured people from those ships, and they were able to come to that colony. So Sierra Leone actually was formed for ex slaves or expatriated slaves during the or after the Revolutionary War. During the Revolutionary War, the British recruited people who were enslaved, and they promised them freedom. And of course, they didn't win, so they took them to Canada. Canada was a little too cold. A lot of them were in New York State. Didn't know that until recently. Couldn't figure out why there was so many Black people in New York that weren't Southern, because my family is Southern and my father's side is from Pennsylvania, but I could not figure out why there was so many Black people from generations to generation in New York. So the British actually had a settlement there, and during the Revolutionary War, they recruited Black people to fight for them, and they offered them freedom. So that's why there were a lot of Black people in New York City. And of course, the northern states became free states, and the southern states wanted to remain slave states and maintain their economic power by keeping their slaves. But that is a topic for another discussion. We're here to talk about travel, but this is history. All right, so don't let anybody tell you that you don't need to know history, because we need to know. So a lot of times we don't know why things are happening and why we seem to not be able to communicate with each other, because we don't remember history. We don't remember what happened because we're not learning it. I'm just of the belief that they're not teaching history like they did when I was a kid. All right. So now, where and when did this Black culture start? And I talked about that briefly. It started in Africa and with the African diaspora. All right. So it's the culture of Black communities in other parts of the world, not just the United States of America. They're everywhere. We're everywhere. So, from the time that the transatlantic slave trade began, it began like around the 1500s. So, there are people here in the United States, Black people, African American people who have been here since then. So, that's a long time. I'm saying like about 500 years, but because the records are not intact for Black people who were slaves, because they had records, but they were counted as like they were property. Whereas in the northern states, they had the option to, in some of the places, it's the slavery, chattel slavery, the institution of chattel slavery in the United States. It wasn't the same in the beginning. People had the option, or they had the ability to earn their freedom, or they were indentured, and after a certain period of time of the contract was up, then they would become free. They weren't all slaves. That came later on. Okay, they weren't life slaves for life. Okay. All right, so that's an explanation of the diaspora, the African diaspora and Black culture, where it all began. All right, now, how is national culture influenced by it? So, wherever these people go, as well as any group of people go, they're going to influence the culture. They're going to influence the culture. They're going to influence the culture. So, how is national culture influenced by it? We see it in food, music, some traditions, fashion, and even language. So there are some terms that get co-opted or adopted and just incorporated into our general language. So that's just how language works. It's not just Black Americans or Black people that this happens with. It happens to every group of people wherever they go, because people have always been moving since the beginning of time. So, all right. All right, so food. How many people think that looks similar or can recognize the food? What we see here is on the right side is like some pig feet, and on the left are some collard greens with some pigtails or something in it. That is an example of some food that came from Africa, right? Or came from a combination of the Africans themselves and the conditions that the enslaved Americans lived under. So a lot of the time, the people that lived on the plantations didn't have like the best cuts of meat. So they would eat, of course, now it's like it's soul food, right? But it wasn't the healthiest, it wasn't the best, it was what was thrown away. And they would take that and they would make wonderful meals out of it. It tastes great, but I can't, every so often I'll eat some, but I cannot eat it, to be honest. Does anybody have any comments or any questions? Who here has tasted collard greens with either fat back in it, pigtails in it, pig feet in it? Now we're doing like smoked turkey. But how many people here? Just put in the comments. Um, yes, if you have, no, if you haven't, if you've tasted some of this soul food. So a lot of this food here, you can find it in the South. It's a staple. Everyone just about makes it. But these food choices, they came from the enslaved Africans. So this is Black culture, which influenced the national culture. And by national culture, our culture here in the United States, because it's so big, is regional. All right. Here's another example. This is jollof rice. Now that looks so much like red rice. And it sort of is, you know what I mean? It is. It depends on what part of West Africa. It's a West African dish, and it's made with tomato. It's tomato sauce based. And depending on what West African country you're in, they make it a little bit different. Ghana, they make theirs mostly with vegetables. Let's see, Nigeria, they put other meat in theirs. Angola, they put a lot of different things in theirs, seafood, other things like that. But this basic dish here is this jollof rice. What we have now, what we eat in the Black community is called red rice. That is an example of something that was influenced from Africa. It came over and survived after all these hundreds of years. We also have okra. Now, how many people know that okra came from West Africa? They brought it. They had seeds. They brought it with them. Yams and sweet potatoes as well came over. So that's like an okra stew. I live in the South. My husband's a Southerner. He loves okra stew. It's not my favorite. I just don't like okra all that much. But that is a staple. That is another dish. Okra stew. They make that in Africa as well, in West Africa. Okro. It's called okro. In Ghana, they call it okro. There are other names because they speak different languages, but that okra stew came from West Africa. And another thing that came from West Africa, I'm going to turn back here for a second just to turn back to the food, is rice. That's the reason, the main reason why the people from West Africa were transported to South Carolina, where I am. I'm outside the Charleston area because of rice. They knew how to cultivate rice. It was called white gold. All right. Now, how does all of this relate to travel? So here we go. According to statistics, Black U.S. travelers spent $109.4 billion on travel in 2019. That was before the pandemic. That's a lot of money. Let me show you that again. Black U.S. travelers, I'm not counting the people from other countries, spent $109.4 billion on travel. That's a lot. Okay, so um, what we're also seeing kicking off is something called heritage travel, and it's all been spurred on because of DNA testing, and Americans. It's people in other countries as well, but since I'm in America, I can only speak for Americans, right? African Americans want to reconnect with their roots. It's been 500 years, y'all. Just think, 500 years. It seems like, right? Well, we know that Black people originally came from the continent, but over 500 years. That's a long time. That's half a century. So, trying to reconnect to our roots is helped by DNA. So, I was actually at a conference July, I believe, an ASTA conference in San Francisco, where I was a part of a research study by FamilySearch.com. How many of you have heard of Family Search? They are a genetics company started by the Mormon Church. They've been around forever and a day. They've been around before Ancestry, but they have a lot of documents that they've collected, and they have this huge database. And they had a group of us from different ethnicities. They had Black people, they had Native American people, they had Black and Native American people, they had Jewish people, they had people from other backgrounds, Americans, mind you, travel advisors. We were part of this panel discussion, and they just asked us things because they were looking for ways to enhance their tool and the offerings that they could provide for people, because now a lot of the records are being released. When it comes to some of the records that were sort of privatized, because when the plantations went out of business, a lot of people came and bought those plantations. So those plantations are not, for the most part, in the families of the original owners. So a lot of Northerners came, bought up the property, made, like tourism assets out of it, remained in private hands. So all of those records, they were private. So a lot of those records have been released and they've been added to the database. Family Search, they do underpin a lot of Ancestry.com. So we did this panel research, panel discussion for them where they were doing their research, and they said that their heritage travel, that's what it was about. They were asking about heritage travel, wanting to know if there were any partnerships that they could possibly establish with travel advisors, the travel advisor community. They want to know where the interest is. And they're saying this because they noticed that there's been a lot of demand for heritage travel. And it all started with the African American community. And then next comes the Jewish community. So we have a lot of Jewish American people who want to go back to Europe, Austria, Germany, Poland, some of these places where during World War II, their family were died because of the Holocaust that happened during World War II. So we have another group of people who are interested in heritage travel, traveling back to Europe to, reconnect with their roots. But this sort of thing started with African Americans wanting to know more and visit Africa. Okay, now that I talked about just the heritage travel and DNA and how that enabled it, we also have Afrocentric cultural experiences that people are looking for. So, not just to go back to Africa, because it's quite complicated after so many hundreds of years to be able to trace yourself back to a specific people group or an ethnicity, because the people on the continent themselves were all different. So the places where they lived 500 years ago are not where they live now. They themselves moved around, they intermarried, the borders changed as a result of so many things over the course of 500 years. A lot of them did move because they wanted to escape being captured for slavery. There were other reasons, wars, or people moved because wherever they lived, it wasn't really a good place anymore. They wanted to find more fertile grounds, trade, all sorts of reasons why people move. Now, it's very difficult to trace your heritage back to a particular people group. Now, there is a DNA test out there called African Ancestry DNA. And I did take that one. That's a different type of test. That I have been matched on my mom's side because it's a matrilineal test. My dad's not alive to take the test, just my sister and I. Um, and our DNA, just a sliver of it, was traced back to the Temini people of Sierra Leone and the Pele people of Liberia. So it's either or. So it's not saying it was one or the other. So that just goes to show you it's a science, it's a difficult science. Now, I did take other DNA tests like 23andMe and Ancestry DNA. I did take those tests. Let us see. Where is my test result? Well, I thought I had my test result here, and it doesn't look like I do, but I'll see if I can pull it up after this. And my DNA is Nigerian, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Liberia, the Gambia, Cameroon, Congo, even Kenya. So that just goes to show you, because they found traces of my DNA and they match it to the test subject. Each company does tests in these areas to match people. That's how they do it, because the people aren't alive anymore. So, that's how they do it. They can take your DNA and they compare it to the DNA of people who live there now. They try to find subjects who've been in the area and have not moved, or their families haven't moved, and they also combine that with history and genetics and things like that. So the part about it, this heritage type travel, is you actually need genetics to go along with that, because it's not going to be a full picture. It's almost impossible. Although I took a 23andMe DNA test as well, and I actually came back matched to a woman in Nigeria. So she's an actual blood relative that we share. And we reached out to each other through the portal. So, and she being 100% African, couldn't tell me definitively what people group they were from, because they moved around so much. And during the transatlantic slave trade, a lot of the groups moved. They wanted to escape it. And so it's almost impossible. But I do know that we're related, because she came back as like my fourth cousin. Some removed. I can never understand the removed part. So we are related. I'll have to use genetics and, records and things like that to sort of piece the rest together on the American side. Okay, so what's it got to do with travel, right? Here you go. You see, like I showed you, that The U.S. travelers, black travelers, spent over $109 billion on travel in 2019. Don't have the 2020. Well, you know what happened in 2020 and 2021, so not counting those. But before the pandemic, 100 and over 109 billion was spent on travel by black travelers. So black people do travel, and the younger crew seem to travel. They're a little bit more adventurous than some of the older folks, unless you've been in the military or something like that. I've been in the military. Um, and they're traveling more, but they are looking for to connect in these destinations. So there's actually a black culture in France and in Paris, Marseille, that is on the coast, right? And there is a black culture in Paris, which is the northern part of the country. In Paris itself, I mean, France itself is different and it's diverse. When I went there last year, I was totally blown away about how much I did not know about Europeans or French people at all. Okay. All right. So back to talking about the Black experience and what people are looking for. Some of the emerging destinations, we have African destinations such as Ghana, Kenya, Tanzania, or South Africa. Those are popular tourist destinations. Uh, Before it was more like safari. Now people are interested. We have Black Americans or Black people from other countries wanting to go to these countries to not just go on safari, but also connect with the locals and connect with the people. So this is what we're seeing now. Also, on the right side, we have people who are interested in learning more about Black culture in Paris, London, Lisbon, that's in Portugal, as well as Amsterdam. So, because of the colonies, mind you, and we don't learn about this, people went to these countries as well. And there are communities there. There are vibrant communities in these cities. And there's actually a Black Paris tour. Um, a couple of tour companies that actually do Black Paris tours, and they talk about um, things that went on in the Black culture and community in Paris or in Marseille. Those are the two major cities. And they talk about these things and they bring out the contributions of Black people in these areas, the Black experience, because it's different than the things that we see and hear in the mainstream. So this is just an example of a coffee shop in Amsterdam. Okay, and that's from their Instagram page. This is a Black coffee shop. You see, he's got a Santa suit on there, but it's a black owned coffee shop in Amsterdam. So the museum in Amsterdam, that main museum in Amsterdam, they also do black tours or black heritage tours or black history tours, whatever you want to call it. But they're talking about and they're incorporating black culture into the tours. Sort of, like black people have been left out of history a lot, a whole lot. Some of the same things are happening here in the Charleston area, where they're incorporating more Black stories here in Charleston, where before you just see all of the plantations and you get in this horse and buggy ride and you go around but you don't really hear the Black stories. They don't talk about the slave quarters. Well, they live there, so yeah, you should talk about it. They have plantations that kids go to on field trips, and yeah, you should talk about it because they had slaves. So, yeah, I remember my son when he was in kindergarten, going to school down here, went on a field trip and they went to visit a plantation. And he, lo and behold, asked the teacher, he was about 6 years old, asked the teacher, "Where's the slave quarters?" And of course, it was uncomfortable. He's like 30, in his 30s now, so this was a long time ago. So, and they told my mom picked him up. My mom went, and Had to have the talk with him. You know what I mean? But we shouldn't have to have a secret chat. It's a part of our history. We should be talking about this stuff, right? Here goes my slide. Here is my DNA from Ancestry DNA. Cameroon, Congo, and the Western Bantu peoples, Nigeria, Senegal, Mali, and 6 more areas from the Ancestry DNA test. I took 23andMe. There were similar results. There was another company, I'm not sure if they're still around anymore, called Afro Roots DNA. They just focused on African DNA, and according to their test, it was like about 10 different people groups I was related to. So they nailed it down to the people groups. They were African themselves, so they knew a little bit more about the actual people groups living there. So that is my ancestry DNA just from Ancestry, not the others. Okay, so here I was talking about Black culture, and this is just an example. What people do, why they want in Paris, they go to Paris, and it's not just Black people. You know, they go and they take these tours. There's a wonderful tour um, called Walking the Spirit Tour, and the tour guide actually is Canadian, and she lives in Paris several months out of the year. She was a college professor, I believe, and she's been doing this for a long, long time. Um, so Josephine Baker, she was an expatriate. That means that she gave up her U.S. citizenship and moved to France. This was during the French Revolution. She became, not the French Revolution, it was the French resistance. Ah, the French resistance. So I didn't mean for a French Revolution, but the French resistance against the Germans. So she was a singer, a dancer, and she was a spy because Paris was occupied by Germany. And in the clubs, she used to dance and sing and listen and pass information to the French resistance. She was the first American woman to be buried with full French military honors, and that was in 1975. And last year, she was interred symbolically at the French Pantheon, and that was done by Emmanuel Macron. So that's a picture of her. And that's another picture of Josephine Baker. She was an American actress, singer, and dancer who moved to France after World War I and stayed. She's made trips back to the U.S., but that was during the Civil Rights era to protest. But she never did move back. She was friends with the Princess of Monaco, and she was originally buried there, and her family didn't want her remains moved from there, so she was symbolically interred at the French Pantheon, which is for their French heroes. So that was quite the honor. And that was last November they did this. All right, I talked about Black Paris tours. That's me in Paris last year. So it was pretty cool. I went on a river cruise, and I started at the south part of France, southern France. I flew into Marseille, took a bus. It was like the tour, not the tour bus, but the transport bus to Avignon, where there was the Papal Palace. Didn't know there was a Pope in France in the Middle Ages. So there's the Papal Palace is still there, and started there on a river cruise on the Rhone, sailed up to Lyon. That is the gastronomy capital of France. And guess what? They eat pig feet because I went into the French gourmet market, and what they had when I went to the butcher side, they had pig feet. I was like, I know what that is. So, a little history of Lyon. Lyon was a working class city, and a lot of poor people live there. So you know, poor people usually eat everything. So they eat a lot of different cheeses in the region. Nerds, where they make the wine, you can go for wine tastings, cheese tastings. Um, so France was nothing like I imagined at all. It wasn't. It was nothing like I was led to believe with the things that I saw on TV. I thought I was going to see all of these people walking around in French couture, just dressed to the T, so cultured, and they were just a bunch of regular people going about their lives. There were lots of farms. I actually went to a truffle farm. And truffles are a delicacy, a French delicacy, part of French cuisine. And it's very expensive. So we went to the farm where the farmer grows them. It's a complicated thing. And there's a truffle dog who sniffs them out and digs them up. And they sell, they're very expensive. So the ship's captain actually came there and bought truffles for the meal. We were like, oh, look at the chef. He's right there. Look. He was buying truffles. But it was amazing. He was a farmer. I'm like, wow. Um, I visited a lot of the little villages, some of the castles or chateaus. They call them chateaus in French, but um, little towns and little villages that they fixed up. They had been in ruins for many years, and they decided to the provinces decided to let's fix these up and make them bring us money. So the pandemic hurt a lot of people in Europe because they rely on tourism. Same as here in the U.S. Charleston is one of those areas as well that relies on tourism. All right, so like I said, there are Black Paris tours, Black Marseille tours, Black Amsterdam tours, Black London tours. So these are some of the things that people are interested in because they want to connect. They just want to know more because like it's just impossible. We've made some changes, some contributions everywhere we've gone. So it's just you just want to learn about what is Black culture. Number one, and Black culture is basically the sum total of cultural contributions to the mainstream culture by culture, sub Black culture. Okay, it's also multicultural and nuanced. It's not one thing, and it's very fluid. It's constantly changing. We talked about number two, Black culture versus pop culture. A lot of times the things we see on TV and social media and in the movies, that's what we call pop culture, and it's in quotes, air quotes, as Black culture, but is it really? No, it's not. It's basically like a lifestyle that's promoted in marketing, fashion brands, music labels, and it's presented as if it is a way that Black people are supposed to behave, think, act, speak, and it's not real. It really does a disservice because it sort of makes other people think that that is Black culture, and it's really not. It's mistaken for the actual cultural experience, and it leads to stereotypes, things like that. Although it's been born out of the Black community, but it's sort of co-opted by big money media to make money, that sort of thing. But that's why it's important that you travel, and it's important that you expand your own mind to learn more about people. I'm genuinely interested because I'm like I want to go to France because I've just felt like I just wanted to go and learn more about these people. One interesting fact about France is now they do not count people by their demographic. They don't do that anymore. It's illegal to do that. So they don't count the number of Black people. They don't count the number of Muslim people. They don't count the number of Asian people. They don't count the number of any other way of counting them by race. They don't do that. So when you come there, they try to encourage you to be French. Just French. So that's a way of sort of getting it done. Okay, we also talked about where you can find this elusive black culture. It's everywhere. And where did it come from? Number four, it came from Africa, and it came with the diasporans. The diasporans who left because of the transatlantic slave trade, and the ones who left because they were seeking either education or financial opportunities elsewhere. For whatever reason, those diasporans brought their culture, it melded together, and it became something different. You see the um, commonality of African culture in food, music, rhythms, things like that. And that's what many people of the diaspora are looking for. The ones who are hundreds of years removed, right? The ones who have left recently or their parents left fairly recently, they have their parents. They can always go back and visit. But for those of us who are classic diasporans, it's been so long. This where would you even begin? Right? So we're looking for some type of connection. All right. So number five, I talked about how national culture was influenced by it. Same thing: food, music, traditions, folklore, fashion, and even language. And how does it relate to travel? Well, it relates to travel because we have something, a phenomenon, and it's a new type of travel that's really in demand called heritage travel. And where African Americans want to learn more about their heritage as much as they can and want to visit. But where do you begin? You start with your DNA. So that's what I did. So at least you have an idea of where to start. So I'm like, I can go to Ghana. And I do have some DNA from East Africa, Kenya, I think. Yeah, Kenya. That's close to Tanzania. I'll take it. I'll go. It's important to hire a travel advisor, especially if you're going across the pond, but really anyone, so that can help advise you to navigate the air or any other thing that could possibly go wrong. We generally have our ear to the ground when it comes to what's going on in the travel space and have strategies and techniques and know how to navigate them. We deal directly with suppliers. We don't use Expedia. No, don't use that. I don't. I'm not saying you don't, but if you want to DIY your trip, use those things. But that's not what I use. I deal directly with suppliers when looking for um, to put together trips or plan trips for my clients. Um, this is Priscilla with Scylla Travel, hoping that you have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening. And remember, as always, live the dream. Bye bye.